Chapter 13. Tracker crawled into the wooded area. He licked his wounds, the blood on his shoulders oozed freely on the fallen leaves. Anyone tracking him would be able to find him. But Beau didn't want to take the chance of going in after Tracker. He figured that Tracker would die soon. He had emptied all his bullets into Tracker with his Glock. Not knowing how many times he had been shot, Tracker crawled with his front paws, taking his hind legs along, trying to get to the dense center of the forest. Each time the bullets hit him, it was as if he had gotten hit by a fallen tree. He peered at his upper thighs. They had taken the brunt of the power of the bullets. But it wasn't his wounds which could kill him, it was the loss of blood which could weaken him, and he would die there in the forest, unable to shift into human form. The way he is now, he would be too weak to fight off a bear, preparing to hibernate for the winter. It was only because of his size and the strength of his hard muscular frame that the bullets didn't throw him backwards and uncover his underside, which could reveal the weakest part of him. That way he would have died at Beau's feet. Some of the bullets had made exit wounds. None had stayed in his body. Aside from his bloody fur, being weak from blood loss, and the force of the bullet hitting him, he was fine, he thought. There was no way he would go out like that. Yet if Beau had been a better shot, or if he had one more bullet in his gun, Tracker would be dead. But Beau couldn't control his temper when he saw Tracker with Zoey, and Tracker in his arrogance wanted to save Beau for last, to prove to Zoey that he could protect her by killing Beau in front of her. Crawling around and clawing through the pine needles, Tracker remembered the teachings of his father. If ever he found himself attacked by a bear, and he was bleeding profusely, then he would search for a particular plant in the forest. He couldn't remember the name of that plant, and it wasn't necessary. He knew what it looked like, but it wasn't anywhere to be found. It wasn't plentiful in the summer, but summer was over, and fall had set in. Dragging himself along with his front claws, unable to stand because he couldn't muster enough energy to shift back into his human form, he curled up under a tree. He stayed there for hours thinking about his mother, Adrian. He never said goodbye to her. He thought about Sadia and how he treated her because of his stubbornness. He thought of Zoey and what she must be going through with Beau. And he thought of his father. He can hear him now cursing and sobbing over his firstborn son. It was then he decided not to die. He had to find Beau. He was an alpha wolf after all, and there was no way he would allow this to happen again. He looked up expecting to see a pine tree as the sun showed a burst of orange ready to set. He studied the tree and realized that it held the next best thing to stopping the bleeding. It was an oak tree, and oak bark could be used temporarily to halt the bleeding. Sniffing the bark, Tracker knew this is what he needed. With some of his strength leaving him, he tried to stay awake. He crawled feverishly to the tree, and with his long fangs he gnawed on the bark of the tree. Pulling the bark and crushing it in his teeth, he moistened it with his mouth, and placed it on the wounds to his chest. He sustained that wound when he rushed Beau, and attacked him as he began shooting. Then he placed some on his thighs. The bullets hit him in both upper thighs. Breathing hard, he lay under the tree for a few more minutes until dark set in. Then he saw signs of dim lights through the trees. It was a town, and there was a path leading to the town. Sucking in a large breath, he managed to drag his enormous body, sometimes using his muzzle and mouth when his paws were tired. Finally he made it down the path where he could see storefronts. The sign of a veterinarian clinic was only a few steps in front of him, if he could walk. But he couldn't, and so he used his front paws to pull the rest of his body in front of the door. The lights were still on. The sign read closed at 8 p.m. He had been in the forest that long. He couldn't remember. Perhaps he had been unconscious for some of that time. Tracker had to get someone's attention before he died. Tracker used his head to hit against the door over and over, rattling it, until a woman in her late 40s rushed out complaining. When she pushed open the door to give someone a piece of her mind, her mouth fell wide in surprise, and she let out a loud gasp. Her hands flew to her mouth in a quick motion. Lying in front of the door lay a huge white wolf with blood spread over his thick fur. Mixed with blood was dirt and leaves. Bending down to see if he was alive, she saw that his chest was moving. "What in God's name who could have brought him here?" she questioned loudly. At first she wanted to believe he was a large dog. At first she thought he was Mastiff, but the color was wrong. Then her guess was a Great Pyrenees. He had the right color for one, but the face was all wrong. He had the face of a wolf, and when she pulled back his lips and saw his teeth, she checked his incisors, she became certain that he was, as she thought, a wolf. A giant wolf. She stood and looked around and listened a few seconds for a truck. How did he get here? She questioned. Now she had to figure out how to get him inside because he was so large, but first she had to sedate him, because she didn't need something as large as this biting her. Turning around and rushing into the kennel, she found a needle and came back and injected him. Now Tracker was completely out. Before, he was in and out of consciousness, but now he knew nothing, and for once he wasn't in control of his surroundings. When Tracker woke, he heard the yelping dogs surrounding him. He raised his head, realizing he was locked in a large cage. It was large enough for a tiger or lion, because Tracker in his wolf form was the size of a lion. A full-grown lion and just as deadly. The woman walked into the room to take a look at him. "You are a handsome animal. I wonder who would do such a thing." She carried a piece of deer meat with her and threw it to him. It fell to the floor. He wasn't a dog where he was expected to do tricks for his food. He smelled the meat, and then he glanced up at her with a raised brow and started eating. Tracker wondered how long he had been there. And what had become of Zoey? How would he get out of the cage? When he stretched his body, it was sore all over, but he could stand and the stitches began to heal. The veterinarian sat near the cage biting her nails and looked at Tracker. "What a fine animal you are. I don't know what to do with you. You've been here a week." That long, Tracker thought. Never had it taken that long to restore his strength. "You're almost well. I can't afford to feed you, and I can't release you." The more she watched at Tracker, she began to see something unusual in his eyes. It had a human quality to them, as if he knew what she was saying. "I think I have to release you because you're making the dogs uneasy," she laughed. "Nothing like a large wolf to get everyone nervous. If the town knew you were here, they would take you out and shoot you, but then someone did, didn't they?" She nervously put her hand into the cage. Tracker thought she shouldn't be doing that, because he was no ordinary wolf. But he couldn't let her know. It was a bad precedence for her to start. So to prevent her from doing that in the future, he snarled, and his large teeth showed as he receded, his lips ready to nip at her, but not go so far as to bite her. "I'm not intimidated by you," she said, and continued rubbing his head, stroking it and talking to him until he fell asleep. It reminded him of when he had gotten agitated by the lightning when he was a pup. His mother, Adrian, would hold him and pass her hand over and over his head, and he calmed. The next day, he paced the length of the cage back and forth like a caged tiger or lion. It was time for him to leave. The woman stood looking at him, and before he could beg to be let out, she shot him with some sort of gun. He collapsed on the floor of the cage, and when he woke, he was lying in the national forest amid tall pines, breathing in fresh air and free. He gazed up and saw a thin layer of clouds and sunlight breaking through the pines. He was home. He had enough energy to shift to his human form. His wounds had healed. He would get yet another tattoo to cover the scars. These weren't battle scars like the ones he got when he was just a pup. Tracker had tangled with a mountain lion when Lycell took his sons camping. He warned Tracker not to hunt on his own, but arrogance and stubbornness bred into him had taken over, and he did what his father said not to do. Much to his surprise, the mountain lion proved to be his match. It took a few days to heal from all the bites and tears to his body. Making his way down the path and to his father's cabin, he spotted the bits and pieces of his bike. Why couldn't he just leave it alone? I love that bike. Hunter will never forgive me, Tracker said. Then shaking his head and picking up the seat and his smashed helmet. He raised the helmet and tossed it into the woods. Then he remembered that there should be 3 bodies lying around somewhere. It appeared as if they never existed. The place had been cleaned of blood, but not the littering of his bike. Tracker took in a large breath and walked slowly into the house. It too appeared as if no one had been there. He searched around looking for his cell phone, and he remembered that it was somewhere on the ground outside. He rushed through the doors, stood looking around, and saw it under a thick pile of pine needles where it lay for over a week. Returning to the cabin, Tracker showered and dressed. He took a few minutes to decide what had to be done. He had to get another bike, and he had to call home. Then he had to rescue Zoey from Beau. She wasn't anything but a good fuck to him, but he couldn't see her with someone that would hurt her. She didn't deserve Beau, and she didn't deserve Tracker. Because all Tracker had in mind for Zoey was to keep her for sex. He called Thorn because he would need him now to take on Beau. Beau had brought others with him, and it proved that Tracker could be distracted by more than 3 men. Especially if they carried weapons. And now that Beau realized Tracker was probably still alive, he would be ready for him the next time they met, and Tracker would be ready too. There was no way he would allow Beau another try at him, because this time may be his last. Thorn, the voice said. In the background, Tracker heard music booming, and a lot of voices shouting and singing. Where are you? Tracker's voice was still weak and he was short on breath. I'm at the club. Damon is here with me, and we're getting ready to fuck these 2 beautiful girls. You must be in Mexico by now having a threesome on the beach. Thorn's tone was playful. I wish, Tracker said. Oh man, you mean you haven't got there yet? That female must be laying it on you heavy. Talk English, Thorn, Tracker said. His tone impatient, filled with sarcasm. I need you to come to Father's cabin, today. I have a problem. Don't tell Father and don't tell Damon. I don't need to hear what Damon has to say. He talks too much, always giving lectures. But I was just about to get laid, he said, complaining. That can wait. Speaking from a werewolf who had his dick sucked too often, Thorn said. Tracker wanted to tell Thorn it wasn't as he had thought. Not even close to that. But he decided not to. He wouldn't believe him anyway. When he hung up the phone, he had to do something about transportation. He could probably backtrack and find Zoey and Beau, but he needed extra eyes, extra ears to deal with him. It was getting kind of old being shot by Beau, and he was tired of the disrespect Beau had been giving him. If he ever was going to show his worth, he had to do it now. He couldn't be an alpha male without showing some kind of leadership. And Beau was making him look like a beta. Tracker could have gone to take care of Beau on his own, but that had proven stupid. His father had said to be wary of men with guns, especially since it's against their rules to use them. Tracker had never listened to Lycell, and now he's paying the price for his pig-headedness. It was better to have another werewolf with him, namely his brothers, but he didn't want Damon along unless it was absolutely necessary. Damon, unlike Thorn, would complain and tell his father everything. He remembered the night that he sneaked out of the house to ride Lycell's prized black stallion. It was the night of the big football game. The reason he didn't participate was because his leg had been broken. It had been broken the week before when he was out chasing deer. He stepped into a hole and snapped his ankle. He didn't tell anyone because he was used to pain, and his muscles were so tight and developed, it didn't bother him. But Damon told Lycell, and Lycell forbid him to walk on the leg and not to play. He told the coaches that under no circumstances was Tracker to play the night of the big game, and for him not to leave the house. This was one of many times he didn't listen to his father. Tracker knew how important it was for the team's morale, for the captain and quarterback, to attend the big game of the season. He went against his father, and even stole his prized horse and rode it into the stadium during halftime. They were down by 7 points when everyone spotted Lycell astride the big black stallion. He rode the stallion as if it was the mascot, which was a black Mustang. He dressed in his football uniform in the school's colors of black and gold when he rode into the stadium, circling the football field twice. Everyone stood and cheered him on, and his team went on to defeat the visiting team by 7 points.